All right. Hello, everyone. It's exciting to be here in Vienna, my first time. Though I've been in Europe many times, but first time here. Beautiful city, except for the rain, you can't see much, But, all right, cool. So I wanted to, this whole event, and you go to many bot conferences, they talk about bots and bot tools and so on. So, my company, Gupshup, we also develop a lot of tools for bot building. We're a platform that provides a lot of different tools. And, as we've been going through actually just to share a little bit more of my background so the context becomes clearer, is the fact that, we've been doing this for many years actually. Even though the bot phenomena is new, messaging has been around for a long time, SMS messaging in particular. We've been one of the largest cloud platforms for SMS, and in the process built out a lot of these messaging-based services that we now call chatbots, right? And in the process of doing that, we realized that, as you go through these phases, you build simple bots, and then you want to add more functionality, very quickly you get to these points where to do these really advanced things, you get to sort of bot to bot. So I'll go into that in some more detail. And while I think most of the conference today, a lot of the sessions focused on how to build a bot and optimize the experience and so on and so forth, while we have a lot of tools out there, I thought it'd be interesting to share something that's further out, admittedly a bit futuristic, but not as much as you think, because it can have a lot of relevance right here, right now, as I'll share in just a second. Okay, so let's just dive in. Just to start off, just stating the obvious. Clearly, the number of bots is increasing. The ecosystem is growing a lot. I think some analyst firm had researched, if you compare the rise of bots with the rise of apps, and maybe even the rise of websites, which was even slower, certainly, the whole app, the bot ecosystem is growing faster than the app ecosystem, measured from sort of, the earliest phases, if you will. So, and clearly as that happens, the number of bots is growing, the interest, conferences like these, and I come from Silicon Valley where we have events like this, like these days, literally one every week or something, so many events out there. So clearly as a consequence of that, tools are getting better too, right? Platforms and cross-channel APIs, just a whole bunch of different things, and I'm sure you've heard many sessions today as well, and you'll continue to hear more, right? So as this is happening, certainly tools are getting better, bots are getting better, but still you could argue that today it's, we're great on quantity, but I think quality leaves a little bit to be desired, right? A lot of people, oftentimes I talk to a lot of enterprises and they ask, okay, what's the best bot out there, or what's a bot that you yourself use every day? And I think the honest answer is we're not there yet, right? Collectively, as an ecosystem, we haven't gotten to the point where there are super engaging bots that are indispensable, that we use literally all the time, every day, right? So, and that's because, building really good bots is also really hard. I'm sure it'll get easier as the tools get better, as developers get more familiar, as we all figure out the medium and so on, but there's so many different things to be figured out, right? I think, which channels do you want it on? How do you host it? Is it structured, or do you put NLP in there? What backend integrations does it have? And I think the previous speaker, I think that was very interesting, that they've combined a lot of different services, right, to build the bot. And then even after you build it, how do you drive discovery, right? This is sort of the most frequently debated topic in the Valley as to, okay, we know how to build bots, how do you get them discovered, how do you drive usage, and so on, and so how do you promote it? So clearly a lot of things to be done, and as I was thinking about why developing bots is hard, an analogy comes up to mind, right? It's sort of, today, bot development behaves a bit like app development, which is also pretty hard, but unlike website development, which over time was much easier or much better, and to me, the distinction was very subtle, right? I think to me, the fact that websites could be interconnected, right, versus apps used to be in silos made a huge difference. Because websites were interconnected, you had HTTP and HTML and hyperlinking and so on. Somebody else, let's say somebody else builds all these websites, and now you could build an aggregator an aggregated website on top of it, which combines this website plus that website and so on to build something else. And then somebody else comes along and adds something on top of it. And very quickly, right, the whole ecosystem benefits from what everybody else is doing, right? Because your website gets better because everybody else's website that you depend on is getting better, and so on and so forth. But you never had that dynamic in app development, right? Every app was built independently. It operates in silos. And my travel booking app doesn't talk to my calendar app, doesn't talk to my meeting scheduling app, doesn't talk, I mean, it's sort of all everybody had to build everything from scratch, right? If you want to do, internationalization, or if you're building let's say a travel site, you have to also take care of, hotels and flights and so on. It's sort of literally everything was being done very, very independently, versus with websites, you think about Kayak, right? They just built it on top of a lot of other services, or any aggregator, any content aggregator generally just leverages underlying components from other sites and aggregates it up, which sort of brings us to this question of what kind of future do we want for bots, right? Do we want it to evolve and grow like apps did, where they operate in silos, which made discovery hard? Think about app stores, finding apps and so on, still a problem, versus web, where they were all interlinked, interconnected, which actually made search easier through PageRank and other things, also made the quality of the whole experience a much, much, much better, right? And, what I'm proposing, I think and not just me proposing so much as I think the whole ecosystem will realize as we go through building these bots is, building more bots and wanting more advanced capabilities is, won't it be nice, not just nice, but won't it be essential for bots to talk to each other so that we can get them to do far more interesting things than are possible today, right? And what would happen, and I'm going to elaborate on some of these in some more detail, but you could have bots collaborating with each other, or delegating tasks to each other, right? Or aggregating work done by other bots, transacting, negotiating, competing, right? Even upgrading themselves, or bots composing other bots, and so on. I think the possibilities are endless once you get thinking about it, right? So I want to elaborate on and hopefully I'd like you to take away the idea that this is really the only way in which you can build. We can push the limits of bot development, create some great experiences, and more importantly, have the whole ecosystem grow as we benefit from everyone else's work, right? So before we go too far, right, have any of you used Interbot, bot-to-bot communication of any kind? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, so I see one hand. Okay. So I think you guys are wrong, right? Let me explain why. Have any of you used any of these devices? Alexa, Google Assistant? Yeah, I get it. Everybody has used it, right? What happens when you talk to Alexa and say, can I talk to so-and-so bot, right? If you think of Alexa as a bot, it really is then going and talking to another bot and enabling that experience, right? Or if you build Google Assistant skills or Cortana or any of these, right? Facebook is a little different because you directly talk to each individual bot, right? But with these voice assistants, right? And I'm willing to bet most of you have interacted with these devices, right? So in a way, this is already happening. They don't position it as such, right? In fact, what Amazon and Google and Microsoft are doing, are they creating their own little walled gardens of bot-to-bot interactions, right? They want you to build, they call it a skill or an action, essentially a bot, and you publish it into their sort of API, which means Alexa now has the combined capability of 10,000, 15,000 skills, or Google Assistant has the aggregate capability of all these other bots, right, to create a richer experience, which leverages sort of bot-to-bot, right? So it's already happening. In fact, I think Amazon and Microsoft just announced that Alexa and Cortana will be able to talk to each other, right? I think it was just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, which therefore means, right, that's the whole trend where you're starting to see these things interacting with each other, right? And what I'd like to propose really is, it doesn't need to be a walled garden, right? It's a little bit like AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe, if any of you remember what I mean, right? Trying to create sort of their own walled gardens until sort of the web took over, right? And just the critical mass of millions of billions of websites eventually just crushed, right? Any walled garden of any kind, ultimately. So I think it's, we are at this early stage in the development of the bot ecosystem. These things are happening. It is going to evolve and it's going to emerge. And I think it really, at some level, as an ecosystem, we have to decide, are these going to be walled gardens controlled by a handful of companies? Are they going to be open standards and protocols that we can all leverage and use and so on, right? So like I was saying, you've used it without realizing that you're using it, right? And that's sort of in a bot conference, right, where there's a lot of sort of bot experts. So I think just if you look at it a little differently, you see this is happening, right? So let's go a little deeper in terms of what can happen when you have interbot communication, right? A few sort of different possibilities, right? You could create, so imagine shopping bots, talking to merchant bots to enable comparison shopping, right? And it's not literally just an aggregation of prices to find the best price, but it's not hard to conceive that these bots might even negotiate, right? They get the best price and say, okay, I want to buy from you, but if you can match that price, then I'll buy from here. Or if I buy 10 items, would you give me a discount, right? And it's possible because bots are sort of dynamic pieces of software. They're just not static web content, right? So, or let's take something more advanced, right? I think I can, let's imagine a gaming scenario where, let's say you have poker bots, and then there's a dealer bot, and between the 5 or 10 of them, they can play out a game of poker maybe in 30 seconds because it all happens so quickly. And some bots actually win and lose money, right? So it's a little bit like the movies, right, where you have battle bots and so on. But could you really have these gaming bots playing out these gaming scenarios? And just opens up a whole lot of possibilities, right? You could have, and in fact, we do this on our own platform, right? You could have bots that are sort of monitoring, tracking, analyzing, even fixing other bots that may be misbehaving or not performing well and so on. Even let's imagine intermediary bots, right, which they act like a concierge redirecting queries. So imagine a hotel concierge bot redirecting queries to a restaurant bot or a movie theater bot based on the query, or even within an enterprise. When you have large enterprises, right, usually they have multiple brands across multiple divisions in multiple geographies and maybe even multiple languages. It's hard to imagine some of these large multinationals building just one bot that can handle everything, right? It's a lot easier to modularize the problem to say, okay, every team or every division will build their own bot, and then you have one sort of customer-facing bot that redirects the query to the appropriate sort of child bot, right? It's easier technically, it's easier organizationally to build specialized bots which can then come together to support more advanced use cases and so on, right? You could have bots organizing themselves in all kinds of hierarchy and groups to perform sort of more advanced tasks as well. And then I think perhaps the most significant thing is the way in which bots are even developed, right? And instead of developing bots, you could just compose bots. You could say, let's say hypothetically, I could take a translate bot, right, plus an NLP bot, plus a simple pizza bot, but simply by stringing them together in sequence, I could have a multilingual intelligent pizza bot, right? And you didn't really build sort of 2 of the 3 components, you just built that little one and you had a simple pizza bot, but you could just do it that simply or that easily. And the other cool thing is, if tomorrow it points to a different translate bot, it speaks 10 more languages, right? Not because you did anything, but because, let's say, Google or Microsoft implemented those things. So, this is what I mean in terms of leveraging, reusing, specializing, right? Today, I mean, you look at a lot of sessions, everybody talks about, okay, here's how to do NLP, here's how to do internationalization. Well, how about you don't have to do it? Just pick the best of breed, plug it into your bot, and it just sort of works, out of the box. And if you think about it, right, if it becomes that simple to compose bots, bots could be self-upgrading, right? Like I said, they point to a different component tool, and it just works better. They could even be self-cloning, right? They could clone themselves by mixing and matching different components out there, kind of almost spawning, arguably a whole new civilization. Because, and by the way, if this sounds far-fetched or crazy, right, there are variations of this happening on Wall Street day in and day out, right? You have bots looking for arbitrages saying, okay, this bot can convert dollar to euro, and this other bot does euro to yen, but combining the two creates a new product, which gives me, a different margin and so on. So I can see analogs of that happening even in sort of regular scenarios and so on. So, and to enable that, right? So we've launched something called Interbot, and depending on time, if I have chance, I'll show you a quick demo as well. It's actually very interesting, very almost delightful to see some Interbot examples working, right? But so we've launched something called Interbot, and it has a very simple sort of language to compose new bots, right? It's literally as simple as that. And if any of you have done shell scripting, right, this would look very familiar. You say, A pipe B pipe C, and assign it to a new bot, and that just becomes a new bot, right? So it's literally like plug and play. You have these Lego blocks that are the components, and you use these components to build sort of more advanced, more complex things. And I'll show you some examples of existing bots and how you can just combine them to make interesting things very quickly and easy. I mean, it just takes a few seconds, really. So consequence of this then is, today when everybody talks about bots, by default we talk about how bots will interact with humans and how do you build the conversational layer and the experience and so on. But once you could have bots composed out of other bots, right, it creates a whole new ecosystem where developers will build bots, not for any human to ever use it, but as component bots to be used by other bots, really, right? Because, I think in the old days, you'd create a library, but going forward, as the bot ecosystem grows and people want to build these sort of experiences, you just, this is a lot easier way to plug and play, than to sort of have to literally make it a developer-focused tool, developer-focused libraries. You could have just component bots that you can mix and match to create other bots out there as well, right? And I think, to me, perhaps the most interesting use case of this might be is you just take, like the example I gave you earlier, take the example of Alexa or Google Assistant and take it to an extreme, right? I think eventually I can see that you'll have these super search bots, right? It's a complete analogy to the search engine, if you will, right? There are billions of websites. How do we discover a website, right? You can't remember that many URLs. You just go to your favorite search engine, you type in the query, it points you somewhere, you go there and transact. Well, won't it be nice if there was the super search bot, which knows every other bot in the ecosystem? And if you have a question, you just describe what you want. You don't need to know the name of the bot, but so long as that search bot can find another bot, so long as there exists some other bot that can address that query, it'll get taken care of, right? And in some cases, I don't even want a link or a reference to that other bot, right? Just give me the information, right? What are the ski conditions in Tahoe, or maybe here I should say the Alps, right? There's a bot that just provides that information. I don't need to, maybe if I want to buy a ticket, it may say, okay, here's, it may hand over to another bot which will actually transact. But in many cases, sort of, you just have this search bot, or imagine another query that often comes up, right? So everybody's building bots, and at some point you're going to have millions of bots, right? And how many, each of these bots have powerful messaging capabilities, but as humans, we are extremely limited. How many bots are we really going to exchange messages with, right? How do you solve that problem? And the answer very likely is going to be each of us will have a personal assistant bot, which then goes and talks to lots of other bots and escalates just a handful of queries to us that are really important to me, right? So keeping my refrigerator stocked with milk and eggs, I don't need to know. Just do it so long as it fits certain parameters, right? But yeah, if something important is happening, right? In a way, this is the equivalent of the human personal assistant. This is how execs manage sort of a huge number of interactions. So it's sort of the same thing, right? We're just getting into a world where we delegate authority to bots, which then interact with other bots to do all kinds of interesting things. So all of this, the only way to enable some of these use cases, some of these possibilities, really is if these bots can sort of communicate with each other, interact with each other, and do these things, right? So now the techies in the audience might ask, wait a minute, don't we have APIs, right? Why are we sort of reinventing this whole different metaphor, if you will? And I think, look, under the hood, it's all software. If you go deep enough, it's probably all instruction code programming, right? But I think bots or bot-to-bot is a much more powerful and simpler metaphor than APIs are, right? And APIs tend to be, they're developer tools, right? How many non-developers do you know integrating APIs and so on? On the other hand, like the example I gave you, plug and play, even a non-developer can say, okay, I want this bot plus that bot to create a new bot, right? Then APIs also tend to be unidirectional. They tend to be synchronous. They're also very fragile. You miss a parameter and it bars, right? But bots are, they can be bidirectional. They're built on messaging which is inherently asynchronous, right? And they're robust. If you don't provide a parameter, it asks you saying, hey, wait a minute, what city are you flying to, for example, right? So the point is, the other thing is APIs are really just computers talking to computers, but bots, because of the way they're designed conversationally, they can talk to both humans as well as computers, which means now you can create these hybrid workflows, right, which are mostly automated, but you may have a human approval in the middle, and you can create these human plus bot sort of organizations as well, right? So I think it just fundamentally, as we are moving to building these conversational programs, suddenly, you need a different metaphor for connecting them up, and I think sort of Interbot is that really, right? So like I was saying earlier, we've launched Interbot. It's think of it as a communication channel, right? Just like Facebook Messenger or Slack or Telegram, which means you can take a bot and with no change to its code, you just publish to one more channel. And once it's published to that channel, it just, all these other sort of things fall into place, right? And yeah, I should mention, we're proposing it as an open standard, right? So it's not meant to be a walled garden or yet another restricted environment. There's a longer discussion. We have thought about things like bot neutrality in the same vein of net neutrality and so on, so you don't discriminate against which bots can be here or not be here, things like that. So, and by the way, as this ecosystem emerges, we are just literally building the first layer, which is the transport layer and a registry. But you're going to need a lot of additional things, right? Like say, which bots can I trust? So you'll need somebody to provide trust and verification. You need some other bots to provide payment and escrow, right? You need reputation and reviews, all kinds of things. And I expect, an ecosystem will emerge around this for the thing to, for the ecosystem to thrive. Just like as it happened in the web ecosystem as well, right? Which websites can you trust with your credit card, right? Which websites are sort of fake versus real, and reviews and so on and so forth. So these are all, in a way, they are solved problems, right? We're just sort of applying it to to a different metaphor and a different channel, and so on. And like I said, it's a channel, which means bots can publish themselves or consume, and once they're published, they can consume other bots as well as compose them, right? So I think, in my view, right, I think this is as significant a step forward as, let's say, in the stage of human evolution, when we went from individual hunter-gatherer ecosystems to sort of modern civilization, right? Agrarian societies, division of labor, everybody doing different things, and so on. And even when I listen to a lot of discussions around intelligence or AI and such, you hear it's not about individual intelligence as it is about collective intelligence, right? Because as humans, we are not all Einsteins, right? It's just that there's a lot of people that come together to form organizations that do really complex things, but are just regular people, really. So in that sense, you could have regular bots, but that combine, that specialize in a few things, and that get together to do interesting things as well. So I think that's really it. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes. I can take a question, or 5 minutes. Okay, and I can take a question or show some quick demos as well if it helps. Yeah.
What happens if I am Mustafa? What happens if more than one bot wants to react to same question in the composition?
Yeah. So you're not throwing out a question in the open saying who wants to answer this, right? You're directing a question to a bot, and only that bot would then respond, right?
So, but you want to compose all the bots, and you want to ask all the bots, and all the bots respond to same question.
No, so whoever is composing, right? There's still somebody there's a developer who's composing these bots and has to put that logic in. Right, so if you're doing a comparison shopping, then you say, okay, everybody tell me the price of this item, and they all respond. Or in something else, it may be sequential. Okay, you tell me this, and then you send it to the next one and get it back, and so on, right?
So you are defining a rule set, and this
yeah. So Interbot is really just saying, look, anybody can talk to anybody. Doesn't mean everybody should. Somebody still has to develop saying this bot should talk to that bot, and so on, right? Yeah, back there.
So in this bot ecosystem, you need a dispatcher bot. So this dispatcher, or this bot that provides the other bots, or access to the other bots, needs to know what kind of bots are in this system.
Correct.
Where does he know? Where does he get this information from, and how does this thing get updated? So if I add another bot, how can the dispatcher bot get to know this information, get updated, and where is this bot located?
So, just one quick second, okay? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this keyboard. How do I get the @?
Sorry, can I just add to the question?
Yeah, please, just get the @.
That's fine, because when you input the bot, probably you tell them what the bot does.
Yeah, so I think there's a registry. Yeah.
What happens when actually the
Can I
bot...
take a quick question? Thank you.
Yeah. So what happens when you actually change in the bot, the own developer, not in the ecosystem? So how do you understand that bot
Sure.
is now a different bot?
So I didn't go into all the details of the implementation, but I mentioned the registry, right? So the registry is the one place. Think of it's the equivalent of the DNS, the domain name server, right? So you go to the registry where different bots have published their capabilities, and then you ask, saying, give me a English to Spanish translator bot. And it would say, okay, here's the list of 10 of those, and then maybe you can pick based on price, based on reputation, reviews, other criteria. But the registry would be the single source of truth. It's like the DNS server where you go in with an IP address and it says, oh, it's actually over, or you give it a URL and it says that it maps to that IP address.
Your bot won't know what the other bot does. It will just have a brief summary of it, and therefore you don't care whether what developer changes on the other bot.
Exactly. So each developer has to be responsible for their capabilities and respecting. It's the equivalent of API signatures, right? So, yeah.
I got one more question. Do we still got 1 minute? Thank you very much. What I was wondering about, it sounds a little bit to me like some of you guys might remember that when we thought some years ago that service-oriented architecture might be a solution for some things, and we put up just web services and web services marketplaces. And sooner or later it happened that basically there was no standard to describe functionalities of each and every individual web service. So taking a look at this here, I'm very much impressed by the idea, all good, following up with that totally. I'm wondering how we can make sure that especially a bot is really serving the functionality that it's described to serve. Like for example saying, well, this is a bot assuring my credit card payment, something like that.
Right.
I can write this down as a text. I might even write some more additional descriptions on it. Still, the bot that is just invoking that specific one.
No, I get it. So I think the reason why I'm more optimistic about Interbot than APIs, right, is APIs were very precise, very specific, very rigid. Okay. The moment you get to bots, right, every one of us is starting with building in a conversational, which means flexible way, which means if an entity is missing, you ask for it. You don't say, I'm sorry, right? It's conversational. So I think it becomes, once you have, it's sort of a higher level abstraction, right? So once you have that, it becomes easier to plug and play. Because even if this bot did not understand that bot, it can ask and maybe it can respond to it and so on, right? So of course, I'm hand-waving a little bit. I think there's a lot of devil in the details. But it becomes easier to have bots, to connect bots, into a sequence than APIs, because there it's sort of very binary. Even if you're slightly off, you're dead on arrival. While here, it can still figure out a way. And I think I can show demos offline. I didn't get any time to do that. But you'll see some of these bots. They're very flexible, very easy to mix and match. But anyway, thank you so much.
Beerud,
Yeah.
just one.
Yeah.
Just one.
Thank you. Okay.